Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. It's Ben Lister here. How are you doing? How are you doing? Right. Welcome to episode 14 of the BL and Friends podcast. Right. Let's crack on. As you know, each week I have a guest, my friends as guests, to talk about their career, their hobbies, their jobs. So let's crack on with this week's guest from all different radio stations. It's the one and the only Kev Roberts, live from Sheffield. Hi, Kev. Welcome along.
No drum roll needed. Good to speak to you, Ben. Thanks for inviting me on.
How are you today?
Feeling okay. A bit worn out because I'm an event promoter as well as being in the radio business. So since COVID has not ended, of course, it's around us, but since the lockdown has been lifted, July 24th, I've actually done 10 gigs. So I'm more active now live with events than I was when I was 21, to be quite honest with you. So
How many reschedules are you? How many events are you catching up on that you've lost?
One a week. Because I do a lot of work at large venues like Blackpool Tower and Blackpool Winter Garden. So I'm across country, and a lot of places like Sheffield City Hall, Hull City Hall, Kingshall, Stoke. So I'm all around the north. You're right, playing catch up.
Yeah, I was chatting with Bernie Clifton the other day.
Okay.
If you've heard of him.
Of course, yeah.
A comedian, and he's catching up on tours as well. I think, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Shall we get on with the questions?
Why don't we?
Question 1. Let's go for it. Where did you start your broadcast career?
Well, this is an interesting one. Where did I start my broadcast career? I used to do a short 15-minute set with a guy called Craig Strong on Trent FM, Radio Trent as it was, back in 1980. And within 12 months, I got a job on a radio station. Amazingly, it wasn't in the UK. It was in Altoona, Pennsylvania, in the US. But the story is quite simple. I'd gone over to America to live there, to have a go, see what I could do, really. That only lasted 12 months, but I got my feet wet and met a few radio people. So my first time with my own show was actually in the small town of Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Brilliant. Yeah. We'll move on to question 2 now. Who were your broadcasting inspirations in broadcasting when you were starting out?
Well, I've got it again because I've spent so much time in the US. I traveled extensively, by the way, through America in the 70s and 80s, living there twice. So I've got a chunk of people from the USA that I love. I'll get to those in a minute. But certainly growing up as a boy in the 60s and 70s, Alan Freeman was undoubtedly my first inspiration. Who didn't, anybody of a particular age, Ben, not your age, I might add, but anybody of a particular age would remember Alan Freeman counting down the charts every week. He did it so well, and it was essential listening. And I used to have a chalkboard when I was a little boy, and I used to try and match his speed. So as he was doing the link, I'd be scrubbing out number 4 and making it number 7. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I think my mum and dad just said, I don't think he's right in the head. But anyway, so Alan Freeman was my first hero. I liked people who were very, very polished. So I think Freeman lit the touch paper for me. You've got probably a lot of people my age would say, oh, Terry Wogan or Jimmy Young, people who were masters of holding an audience just with very simplistic chat. They had a place in radio and, of course, were very successful. They weren't for me though. I liked DJs. I've always been a person that I'm a DJ with presentation skills, and I'd rather be that than a presenter with no DJ skills. That's what I subscribe to. So that's the road I went down. So Alan Freeman certainly lit the touch paper. A little bit later on, Steve Wright. He brought a lot of fun and excitement, albeit it was very Americanized. But I loved him in the 80s. I don't think there was anything really any better. And obviously Kenny Everett for his comedic input to radio was excellent, but not too many, I have to say, Ben. In the UK, I think we've always been behind other countries. Certainly the US, they've had so many different styles and genres to listen to, dating back 50, 60 years. So we're still playing catch up now, to be quite honest. But they were my early heroes from the UK.
Yeah, and also you should, as I also say, we should look back at the history of radio, because there's a lot of podcasts with the history of radio with a guy called David Lloyd.
Yeah, I know David. He and I used to work at Saga, I think. Saga Radio, which before it became Smooth. So I do know him.
Yeah, and someone else, one of my other guests, recommended him, Jonathan Gold, who's also a radio icon.
I know John. John worked at Radio Air in Leeds when I was on Magic.
As a tech hop.
He was, yes.
And he was also on Viking as well.
I'm sure he was, yeah.
And now he's running, and now he does a few shows, but he also told me about the history of radio, and he said I should get David Lloyd to do one of these.
Yeah, reach out to him.
I have, yeah, and I'm trying to get as many guests as I can. I've done 102 podcasts this year. This is 104 now.
Wow.
Yeah, busy man. Yep. We're on to question 3, are we?
Yeah.
What is your favorite part about the job?
I'm a guy who loves music radio. I don't try and do anything else but because apart from podcasts, of course, I mean, I've got lots of podcasts where I've interviewed people, but on air, I like music radio. So I like to show my enthusiasm and knowledge, and hopefully it resonates with the audience. That's the thing that gets me fired up. Plus the songs. I've been pretty much in the gold business now all my life. So a lot of tracks that you hear, I've probably been playing them for 50 years. Certainly long before I got into radio, when I was a club DJ. I celebrate 50 years next year of being in the business. So I'm still as enthusiastic about those songs today as I was back then. So I think that's the one part of the job that keeps me going, keeps me inspired. Hopefully the listeners share that they probably, going back to the Bugle song, "Video Killed the Radio Star," there's a bit of truth in that, I think. But I think there's also part of their subconscious that says to the listener, that person knows what he's doing. I'll listen to them without really knowing who you are. And they dip in and out with their favorite presenters without really knowing too much about them. I think if you accept that, you'll have a happy life broadcasting. But if you're trying to do too much in an industry where there aren't many radio stars, and that's the problem now. There were 50 years ago, but those days are slipping by.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And now we'll move on to question 4. How has COVID affected your life and line of work?
Well, certainly setting up my current radio station, which we spoke earlier about, 45 Radio. It's a gold service that is hopefully trying to keep people young. The positive spin out of COVID is that we amass lots of listeners, because we, like most radio stations, large and small, suddenly everybody started listening to the radio. They got not much to do, certainly in that really dark period of lockdown. So our figures rocketed, particularly on Amazon Alexa. So as a radio service, we've got more popular, not necessarily more profitable, but certainly more popular. So that part's okay. My full-time business is as an event promoter. As I mentioned earlier, I'm up and down the motorway working with various venues. Of course, the hospitality sector has been ground zero. So we've come out of that now, and the last 8 weeks have been manic, to say the least. But the previous 18 months, very, very difficult, because most people in entertainment have not been furloughed. So you can imagine there's been a real squeeze on.
Yeah. And also, how's your station coping with it all?
Well, as I say, 45 in a popularity contest, it's doing well. We've got a lot of feedback. Where it all leads, though, I don't know. I and my team are doing it because we love it, but we've got an eye on the future. You know, we don't want to be an unwelcome guest on the dial that just happens to be there for the sake of it. I think there's too many of those. But I'd like to think that we're making a difference. We're a very happy sound. We're a very happy sound for people who are over 45. You know, we're an energy station with voices that have been heard for many, many decades. You know, most of our team are ex-Capital, ex-Radio 2, ex-Smooth, Magic. So we've got a good team, and, you know, I'm glad I'm part of that camaraderie.
Who's the biggest name on your station?
Well, that's slightly, that's a tough question, to be quite honest with you. I think certainly in terms of the amount of time in daytime radio would have to be Steve Collins. Steve is the former program director at Smooth, and I think many other stations. He was ex-Capital. So Steve's been around an awful long time. Obviously, we've got a few bought-in shows too. We've got Roscoe on there, and we've got David Hamilton. They're not making shows specifically for us, but they fit what we do. But most of us who are on 45 have been around a bit. You know, we've been at various stations. You mentioned Carl Kingston earlier. Carl's with us. He presents Friday Night Fever. And Alton Andrews, he was from Luxembourg. You know, we've got a team of journeymen who know what they're doing, and hopefully those voices have been there for, well, we've been there 3 years now. Most of us have been together for 3 years, so it's a good feeling. Good feeling to be around them and playing this music that we all love.
Brilliant. Now we'll come on to the last question on my list. What advice would you give to young, aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
Wow, you leave the toughest question to last. I think it's easy. The knee-jerk answer, Ben, would be don't do it, because in the early days, 60s, 70s, 80s. If you got persistence, it generally paid off and you landed a gig. But I've seen so many colleagues with a lot of talent, for reasons unknown, just having their contracts not redone for another year, and they eventually get annoyed and leave the business. There's a lot of talented people who are no longer in radio. So I would say this, look, it's a different world. It's all about how many likes you get, or your profile as an influencer. It's not just about pressing buttons and speaking in a mic anymore. You've got to have a lot more. Some people have done that very well. We spoke earlier about our mutual friend, Stephanie Hurst, who has done a great job. Stephanie gets it completely and has progressed and embraced that world. I think there's a chunk of us, though, who are sort of past 60 years old, that maybe it's too late for us to get into that. Although I'm on it daily, I have to say, I'm doing it daily too. But I think it is a younger person's world. So it's a different job. What I'm trying to say is it's a different job. So if you're thinking of becoming a broadcaster and you want to be on the Radio 1 Breakfast Show, please have a plan B. Please do something else. Work on radio. Work at your art. To make it a potential plan A, but always have a plan B. Otherwise, you may get upset that it doesn't come off for you, and then you don't really have a job, and then you end up just, doing anything. So get your ducks in a row, think it through, work it out, and hopefully your dreams will come true.
This is why I'm doing this, so in the future I can send these banks of podcasts off to the different radio stations, and this series and my other 2 podcast series, not my Ben Lister podcast radio show series, are looking for homes on syndication radio stations.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a lot of radio stations coming. That's for sure. I mean, the smaller DAB platforms that are on the way are all going to be housing 20, 25, 30 stations. So for a while, Britain is going to explode. I mean, we're probably going to have a couple of thousand stations across the UK. Where it all leads, I don't know. I've been in many debates where it might lead. I've got a feeling there'll be some casualties there and it'll eventually quieten down. But there's certainly some variety coming, which is badly needed. Otherwise,
it's all because these big stations are swallowing up the little stations.
I think that was inevitable. I think that's inevitable. I think where the industry's gone wrong is they should have saw that coming. And these DAB platforms ought to have been up 5 years ago. Because then the larger conglomerates can't buy everybody out. And then it will be a survival of the fittest. We'll be back to the USA, back to that platform. But at the moment, there's very little competition. That's why I don't worry about it. I'm not interested in who's doing similar to us. We know what we're doing, and we'll continue with that. I don't think you can beat yourself up and say, well, greatest hits or gold from Capital. Oh, we've got to try and outdo. You're never going to outdo them. No one's going to outdo them. So also, they are who they are. You go down your own road.
And also, I hope these community and local stations can one day be on par with the other stations, these other big corporation stations.
Well, I don't think they will be, because they'll never have the finance. I mean, it's a little bit like football, Ben, isn't it? The clubs who got into the Premiership in the 90s have got richer and richer. Most of them, not all, but to try and emulate what they've done. I mean, try and be as professional as they are. Follow all the guidelines. Do your best, but you've got to remember that they've been around a good while, Global and Bauer. and they're just doing what comes naturally. All I can say is hopefully they'll get more challenges. But the smaller stations coming to DAB are not going to be that challenge. They've just got to go down their own road and
see where it leads.
And see where it leads. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we hope it leads to good things.
It will do, because there's going to be variety. That's what it's all about. There's got to be some kind of, variety. I mean, people may say, well, there's plenty of variety at the moment because a lot of the larger stations have got spin-offs, haven't they? They're all plus or some other add-on to what they're doing. But at the end of the day, they will only play so many songs. And I think the music variety is much better, or it's getting much better. And as you say, with the community services, they will be able to do things that the larger stations can't do because they'll be talking directly to their own community.
Yeah. That's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us, Kev.
A pleasure, Ben. Thank you very much, and good luck with the podcast and your broadcasting career.
Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. But do join me again soon, very soon. But for now, please give it up for Mr. Kev Roberts. Thank you very much for watching. This will be available on YouTube and Wix.com. So stick around, stay tuned for that later on when I get a chance. And thank you very much. Thanks very much for joining me. And that's a wrap.